In 1863, a construction company known as Credit Mobilier emerged amidst the fervor of America's economic expansion. Founded by a consortium of railroad executives, this company primarily served one purpose: building the Union Pacific Railroad. This critical artery was crucial for linking the East and West of a rapidly transforming nation. The vision was ambitious: accelerate westward expansion and stimulate industry. But with ambition comes opportunity, and opportunity, in this case, morphed into something more sinister. As the Civil War raged on, the demand for transportation surged. Railroads were the backbone of the economy, delivering supplies and troops to battlegrounds across the continent. The Union Pacific, chartered in 1862, aimed to construct a rail line that would traverse the Great Plains and eventually connect with the Central Pacific Railroad at Promontory Summit, Utah. The expansion of this network wasn't just about trains. It symbolized progress and prosperity. Towns sprouted where rail cars had once stood idle, and the economy buzzed with newfound life. Fueled by federal land grants and loans, Credit Mobilier quickly took center stage. The company secured contracts from the Union Pacific, granting it powerful leverage over a system ripe for exploitation. Utilizing extensive connections in Washington, D.C., the executives orchestrated contracts that favored Credit Mobilier disproportionately. This was not mere entrepreneurship. It was a meticulously crafted scheme that would allow them to drain funds while portraying themselves as indispensable to the nation's growth. Construction costs soared under Credit Mobilier. The company charged the Union Pacific exorbitant prices for materials and labor, inflating expenses and pocketing the difference. Trailing behind the whistle of the locomotives was a mountain of deceit. Shares in Credit Mobilier traded high as whispers of a prosperous future reached investors. Unbeknownst to them, the corporation was gaming the system. Supporters of the railroad sang praises, heralding it as a beacon of American capitalism. But beneath this facade lay a despicable truth. Greed poisoned the well. Executives lined their pockets while swindling both the public and small investors who believed in the dream of a new, connected nation. The ingenious financial maneuvers dominated discussions in railroad circles, yet the wider public remained largely unaware. The power dynamics shifted dramatically when the scandal neared its crest. Critics emerged, questioning the ethics of the inflated contracts and the shady dealings with lawmakers. The railroad was not just a business venture. It was by now a web of corruption tangled between government officials and corporate titans. As more revelations surfaced, the public bristled with anger. Newspaper headlines blared accusations of treachery and betrayal. Yet amidst the outcry, certain politicians found ways to protect themselves. In a shocking twist, some members of Congress had secretly invested in Credit Mobilier, profiting handsomely from the very schemes they were supposed to regulate. As the narrative unfolded, the boundaries between government and illegitimate business eroded, exposing a spectacle of avarice. As public outrage simmered, investigations began, seeking the truth behind this monumental breach of trust. Who would take responsibility? Who would be held accountable? And more significantly, how deep did the corruption run? The very fabric of the government was in jeopardy, as watchdogs sniffed out the pervasive rot within the system. Join us as we delve deeper into this monumental scandal in our next segment. Who were the key players that orchestrated this devastating betrayal, and what could it mean for the future of American politics? As the construction of the Union Pacific Railroad surged ahead under the banner of Credit Mobilier, the seeds of corruption took root deep within the ranks of Congress. How did it happen? Credit Mobilier's executives, among them Oaks Ames, masterfully manipulated the financial system. They awarded themselves staggering contracts, inflating costs beyond reason. While railways were essential for a rapidly expanding nation, the expenses ballooned under false pretenses, siphoning off millions from taxpayers for projects that should have been run efficiently. Oaks Ames, a key player, was not just a railroad magnate. He wielded considerable influence as a congressman. His dual role seemed innocent on the surface, yet it enabled a web of deceit that ensnared his political peers. Through an intricate network of connections, Ames ensured that Credit Mobilier's interests aligned with legislative favor. The contracts awarded to Credit Mobilier were not only overpriced, they were backed by government-sanctioned guarantees. With each inflated price tag, profits soared into the pockets of those at the top, while leaving the American public to shoulder the bill. As local small-scale investors noticed their interests being crushed under the weight of deceit, whispers of misconduct began to climb the political ranks. They wondered, how could such a monumental flow of taxpayer money escape scrutiny? By 1872, the scandal began to crack wide open. Journalists and reform-minded politicians stepped into the fray, determined to expose this tangled web of financial malfeasance. Evidence emerged that implicating congressional leaders, some of whom had secretly enriched themselves through investments in Credit Mobilier. As plates turned and stories broke, the political climate shifted. People wanted answers, and the media frenzy intensified. Investigations erupted both in courtrooms and in the halls of Congress, where accusations were hurled like weapons in a battlefield. The public struggled to comprehend the reality of what was unfolding. Would the very institutions meant to protect their interests be brought to justice? Investigative committees began to shape up, digging deeper into initial findings. Documents surfaced, testimonies piled up, and what started as a minor query spiraled into a genuine exposé of corruption at the highest levels of power. The implications threatened not just a few influential businessmen, but also the entire integrity of the government itself. The connections ran deep. Figures like Vice President Schuyler Colfax and representatives across both aisles were implicated. Their silence spoke volumes. They hoped to weather the storm. Yet the ability for any of them to remain untouched diminished as revelations unfurled. The scandal possessed the potential to upend careers, tarnish reputations, and shake the very foundations of government. But a shocking twist awaited. Just when it seemed that the scandal couldn't get any deeper, key pieces of evidence emerged. Evidence that would not only implicate more politicians, but also raise questions about the very future of American capitalism. As pressure mounted on the implicated and their associates, the investigation hit a pivotal moment. Would they manage to escape accountability, or would the truth finally prevail? What was the next shocking revelation that would force the government to face the music? In the spring of 1873, the Credit Mobilier scandal erupted into public consciousness like a powder keg. The congressional hearings commenced, drawing attention like a moth to a flame. The nation watched as journalists scrutinized every detail, unearthing the power plays of a company that had exploited the very infrastructure meant to bind the country together. Testimonies in the House of Representatives laid bare rampant corruption. Investigators uncovered a labyrinth of deceit where inflated contracts funneled millions into the pockets of Credit Mobilier's executives. Oakes Ames, the mastermind behind this enterprise, stood at the center, a figure both revered and reviled. The stakes skyrocketed as congressmen connected to Ames found themselves ensnared in a web of scandal. Prominent political figures, including future Vice President Schuyler Colfax, were implicated. Colfax had accepted shares in Credit Mobilier, a move that raised eyebrows and sparked outrage. How could a man elected to serve the public be so entwined with corporate greed? Calls for transparency surged, and citizens demanded answers from their leaders. As the hearings unfolded, so did the brutal reality. A series of backroom deals had subverted democracy itself. Public reaction was swift. A profound sense of betrayal seeped through the nation. Newspapers blasted headlines that echoed sentiments of outrage and disbelief. Political cartoons mocked the very idea of integrity in government, portraying legislators as puppets, dancing to the whims of corporate masters. Trust, once granted freely, eroded like sand beneath waves of skepticism. Whispers of conspiracy replaced conversations of progress. It became clear, America was at a crossroads, grappling with the soul of its democratic ideals. The hearings revealed the clash of money against morality, and the public was watching with bated breath. Senators and representatives took the stand, often squirming under the pressure of testimonies that painted a damning portrait of collusion. Names were dropped, connections exposed. The very fabric of Washington, D.C. began to unravel before the eyes of a nation desperate for accountability. As the scandal unfurled publicly, it transcended mere financial misdeeds. It exposed a system where the rich and powerful operated above the law. In the minds of many Americans, the link between government and corporate interests was now undeniable. The question loomed large: could the institutions meant to protect citizens be trusted, or had they become mere tools of exploitation? The very democracy that promised liberty and justice for all seemed under siege. Calls for reform echoed from city streets to the halls of power. The clamor for change grew louder. Politicians, once untouchable, faced backlash in the form of protests and threats of voter retaliation. The tide of popular sentiment shifted. Discontent simmered as citizens demanded rectification and a return to ethical governance. But there was a deeper layer to this unfolding drama. As the investigation continued, whispers of a much larger conspiracy began to surface, one that hinted at an even more intricate web of corruption reaching beyond Credit Mobilier and ensnaring the nation's most powerful leaders. What shocking revelations lay just beneath the surface? What more was to be uncovered about the alliance between politics and profit? The stage was set for revelations that would shake the very foundations of American politics once again. Stay tuned, because the next chapter could alter the course of history itself. The aftermath of the Credit Mobilier scandal was seismic. As news of the corruption spread, the political landscape shifted dramatically. Public outrage engulfed the nation. Citizens who once trusted their leaders now questioned the very foundations of their democracy. Calls for reform echoed from town halls to the halls of Congress. In 1874, the House of Representatives, driven by this outcry, established a committee to investigate the scandal's fallout. The intent was clear: restore public trust and impose regulations that would hold government officials accountable. Proposed reforms included stricter oversight of financial dealings and the establishment of clearer boundaries between private interests and public service. But would tangible change follow? The specter of corruption loomed large, and skepticism lingered. As the investigation unfolded, it became apparent that the scandal was just the tip of the iceberg. The railroads were the lifeblood of the American economy, but the Credit Mobilier debacle shattered their reputation. The massive corporations behind these railroads were now viewed with suspicion. Once revered as engines of progress, they came to symbolize unchecked greed. Investors, wary of further betrayal, began to pull back. The very industry that had spurred the nation's expansion was now seen as a breeding ground for malicious self-interest. In the long term, the legacy of Credit Mobilier deepened the public's wariness toward corporations and government ties. The scandal ignited a wave of suspicion that would persist for years. People began to see the intricate dance between big business and politics with a critical eye. This was not just a financial blunder, it was a betrayal of trust that reshaped the narrative of American capitalism itself. The connection to this broader narrative is significant. The scandal revealed vulnerabilities that lingered in the heart of American capitalism, the susceptibility to human greed, and the potential for corruption to seep into the most powerful institutions. With this disgraceful episode, the nation recognized a troubling truth. Unchecked ambition could not only rob investors, but betray the very ideals upon which the country was founded. Beyond the immediate aftermath, consequences rippled throughout society. As the public pressed for greater accountability, politicians found themselves walking a tightrope, wary of the massive corporations that could make or break their careers. The movement toward reform sparked initial progress, but would it be enough? By the end of the 1870s, the shadows of the scandal began to elongate. The power dynamics shifted subtly but unmistakably. New regulatory strategies emerged, partly in reaction to the Credit Mobilier fallout. However, the question of whether these reforms would curtail the deep-rooted specter of corruption hung in the air. Were lawmakers genuinely committed to change, or was this merely a temporary balm for public fury? As the nation moved into a new era, it grappled with its identity in the face of corporate power. What would the next steps be? Would the lessons of the Credit Mobilier scandal endure, or would the cycle of greed and betrayal repeat itself? The answers lay tantalizingly out of reach, compelling the nation to confront its past and contemplate its future. What lies ahead as this story unfolds?